Hello everyone, Zelrinth here, and today we're going to take a look at pull priorities. Now this one's going to be a little bit different than my other ones where we kind of look at all kind of units and who you want to look to for the future. And this one's more targeted towards those of us who are going for multiple copies of units in the future. And I want to take a look at what I would consider my top 3 priorities for the people that are doing that. And kind of help make a decision on whether or not, especially since Clueke's Nick, you want to go over her dupes or continue saving for an upcoming unit. Because I will say Clueke would not be my #1 top priority, especially if you're going for a V6, because I think you have far better options in potentially these other 2 units that we'll discuss here. So we already know Clueke, so let's take a look at Clueke first. Clueke is a monster on her own, especially if you go all the way to V6. Now, we already know that you only need V0 to make her an AoE monster in the game. And she basically can cover everything in terms of the AoE content just at V0. And the nice thing about that, as well, is her best weapon, which they even show here on the spreadsheet, is the Planeta, which is the free-to-play weapon. Well, I wouldn't say free-to-play, but it is the standard weapon, Tololo's weapon, because she really doesn't scale well off her own weapon unless she gets V3 or higher, and that is because that's when she's really starting to do that single target big damage where she wants that extra corrosion in there. Now, when we look at her dupes, she has 2 main stop points on her dupes that you want to look at, and that is going to be V3 and V6. And there's really 2 big reasons for, there's a big reason for one V3 and there's a big reason for V6. And I mean, there's a little bit of mix in between the other ones, but the reasons those are the stop points is V3 is where you can actually kind of use her for bossing at that point. At V3, now her ultimate, which you can basically spam with her, up to a maximum of 50% if a boss target is hit, it gets that 50% damage immediately with that. So it basically makes it where now she does comparable damage for boss, dealing damage to bosses. And then when you pair her with Mekti and Parita, you can really start getting some single target damage with your corrosion team. And that's pretty much the biggest thing there, is it's just giving you that, you have V1 and V2s in there, which also adds more to her kit as well. But overall, a great damage increase there and makes her capable of bossing. And so it is a good stop point if you're a person that wants to invest in dupes and you're not like a heavier spender. This is realistically all you need if you just want to be able to use her for pretty much all content. Now, V6 is where it does go to insane lengths in how much damage she can do. And that is because it now converts her ultimate's width by a lot. I mean, she has a lot more added in there, but the biggest thing that really the reason I'm getting V6 as well is it just makes her a monster on everything, and you're pretty much going to take her into any content in the game, because not only can she boss, but she can clear massive maps with a lot of mobs on them as well. And that is because when you look at her ultimate right now, this one does a line amount of damage. What the last V6 does is it gives her that AoE has 2 added to the left and right. And with her ultimate, she already can do it twice in a row. But when you look at the grid, it adds, if you just take 2 over on both the left and the right, you now have a 5x5 grid of damage that she can do in a turn. And you pretty much can, if she's strong enough and can one-shot the enemies, she can, in a lot of maps, probably wipe out the entire map in just one single turn by herself. Especially if you're bringing Mekti and Parita alongside her. And that is the reason that a lot of people want to get her dupes to that level. But to me, ultimately, V0 is all you need if you're just looking to be able to have the best AoE unit in the game, because that's what she is at V0, and V3 is for bossing, V6 is just to destroy entire maps with AoE. But when it comes to my other top 2 units, that is going to be Springfield and Chahua. Now, these 2 units of priority of these 2, I would actually take Springfield out of all of them when it comes to the dupes. But first, I want to look at Chahua, and she's a more recent one. And this list will evolve as we go on, as we see new CN units. But first, I want to look at Chahua, because right now, the burn team is looking to be fully solidified as the top to me, they look to be the top single target damage dealing team in the game, especially now that we're already seeing that Sharkery is getting a massive buff with the next CN update, where she now does burn damage, which means she can take advantage of Vector's additional support actions because she does the burn damage. And so Chahua is a main core member to that team. She's another one that can do a lot of support actions. But the biggest thing with her in terms of getting dupes is with this attack, or this like debuff called Scorched Mark. And what this does is at the end of action, the caster deals burn damage equivalent to 7% attack to the holder. For each additional stack, increases the damage multiplier by 7%. The number of stacks are then reset. And then when the holder receives burn damage from enemies, increases the number of stacks by 1. This can be stacked up to 12 times. Is removed upon the caster's death and is considered a burn type debuff and continuity spell. There's a big thing in this. This is whenever teammates do burn damage. The entire burn team is doing burn damage, with now Sharkery doing even more since her support action is now burn damage. Now, there's a limit where it says 12 here. This can do a lot of damage at V0, but it's 7% stacked up to 12 times. But now we start looking at her dupes. And I think she has the very, very, very broken and probably it's probably the highest damage hit you can do in the game. I may be mistaken. Someone may be able to show me bigger numbers. But from what I've seen, the amount of damage that can be done now, especially with Sharkery, I think it's even higher than what I've seen in video. And that is because if you look at her V3 and V6, what it does to that debuffed Scorch Mark and how it makes it so much better. And we have the V3 makes it so Scorch Mark no longer has a maximum stack limit. It has a stack limit of 12 initially, and so it's nothing too crazy at that point. You're basically, 84% damage at 12 stacks. But now you can get as many stacks as you want at V3, and with the entire burn team all doing burn damage, pretty much, mostly, especially now that Sharkery can with her expansion key with her support actions, that is quite huge. And then you have a new effect added when dealing burn damage with targets with Scorch Mark, is that if it's more than 10, each additional stack increases attack by 1%. So now it's just making the attack even stronger. So it's going to be a very large damaging attack there. V3 is a good point to shoot for on her. But then you also now have the next big upgrade on her, which is her V6. And this is where it makes her extremely broken. If the skill hits one target, increases the damage dealt by 15%. Nothing crazy there, but that's going to be great for bossing by itself. But the biggest part of it is that last part, enhances the effects of Scorched Mark, increases the damage dealt per stack by 10%. So that's an additional 3% per stack that you have the ability to get unlimited stacks of. And the number of stacks gained when receiving burn damage goes from 1 to 2. That basically doubles the damage of Scorched Mark because you're putting a double the stacks on the boss. And like I said, there's no limit to these stacks. And you're doing a ton of instances of burn damage with the burn team. And that makes her extremely broken at V6. And there's all the extra buffs that built into all her other dupes as well. Like your V2 is pretty good at Y support, activating 1 to 2 times now on her, which is basically her support action. That's great, but none of them compare to the V3 or V6 to the point that if you're going to invest in getting dupes on a unit like her, especially going all the way to a V3 on someone, she is a great unit to do that. Now, I actually put her, when it comes to pull priorities, below Clue-K. Some others may disagree, but my reasoning that I put her below Clue-K is because Clue-K is very good at being just throw her in any team and she's going to be great. You have any team and you want an extra unit that goes out there and does damage, that you can throw her in there. Why that works really well is with the platoon bosses, while you can borrow someone's V6 Clue-K, if you have your own V6 / your own V3, you can do a fight with your own V3, and then borrow a V6 of another unit that you might have in your platoon. And then you can borrow a V6 Clue on your next team. The reason Chahua I put lower priority is because she is exceptionally well pretty much with just the burn team. And that means you're only really going to use her on one of your attacks of a platoon boss. And that is going to be with your burn team. We already have QJ that everybody can get for free. And she's the one that you're eventually going to want to get V6 at some point being a standard unit. So you have her. If you get Cinerisi down the line, she's great. If you don't, you still have, you have the... I'm not even going to say the name because everybody says I say it wrong, so I'm not even going to say it. But you have the SR healing burn unit. And then you also have a Vector, which the advice you're pretty much going to get when Vector comes out is to get her, if you're going to heavily invest in the burn team, get her to V1 so she adds an additional 2 support actions to your burn members. And so if you have that burn team, you have your QJ, you have your Vector, you have Cinerisi, guess what you're going to want to do in the platoon boss? Just borrow somebody that gets a V6 Chahua. Because if you have your own V6 Chahua, who are you going to borrow? I mean, you should easily be able to get a V6 QJ. And maybe you don't have Cinerisi, so you borrow a Cinerisi, but she's not too crazy. Like, she's great, but she's not crazy for the burn team. And definitely not someone I'm going to borrow for the burn team. So nothing really to borrow there. Vector, yeah, I guess you could borrow a V6 Vector, but why not invest in making your own Vector better, who's generically a little bit better to me in terms of value to your team on that aspect, to just get her to V1. Because V1's really the big thing with her. So while she is extremely good, if anybody in your team gets a V6 of Chahua, she's the one to borrow over the burn team. She's the best one to borrow. So that's the only reason I'd put her below Clue. Other than that, I'd say she's actually more valuable than Clue in terms of providing damage to a platoon boss or any other boss within the game. And then we'll look at the final one of my top 3 if you're going to go for dupes. And that one is, I think everybody knows, obvious, is Springfield. And Springfield actually has... I consider it 3 great breakpoints for her. And Springfield, to me, is pretty much the best unit in the game, still at this point in CN. And to me, Springfield is probably the best unit to invest in this game at this current point in CN. I put her above Clue and I put her above Chahua because she's just that good. And that is especially if you just need a V1 to really get the best out of her, but she gets even better if you want to invest even more into her. And that is going to be, so if we go down to her dupes here, the first one with V1 is the big one, which is increased HP restored by 130%. Not a big deal. Who cares about the healing? Enhances effects of overflowing care, whatever. It's more of the healing stuff and that. But the biggest thing is applies 6 stacks of shared telepathy to the ally that you're putting this skill on. And what shared telepathy is if the holder's active attack deals hydro damage, increases confectance index by 1 point. It is only effective once. She's putting 6 stacks on the teammate. This is considered a hydro type buff and cannot be dispelled. The biggest thing with that is it makes Tololo a monster. Right now, Tololo, for a lot of people, as we start getting better units, is going to start to fall off for them. What her V1 allows is Tololo to go 3 times in a single turn once Tololo gets her expansion key. We don't need to go into the details of it, but basically Tololo gets an extra turn if she maxes out her confectance index. This makes it where when she does hydro damage, she gets confectance index point. And a Tololo that's V2, all of her attacks do hydro damage. So whatever attack she does, she gets that. And so it's very easy, if you utilize her correctly, to attack 3 times every single turn. It absolutely makes the Tololo broken. And then she's your sustain for that team. And then what I've seen is a Springfield Tololo can fit in any team. Like, you don't even need the rest of the Hydra team. They will fit in any team quite well on their own. But then now we start getting into the other ones. And that is because Springfield herself can start to have her own massive amounts of single target damage, where she even competes with QJ and Clue-K in terms of their damage. And that is her V3, which has her little summon that she summons out there. So, new effect added for that summon, increases Hydro damage received for the target that Tarez is following and all enemies in a 3-tile radius by 10%. Right there, more damage for Tololo to do. Great. If he's on the field, increases Hydro damage dealt outside of one's action by 40%. More damage from Hydro. When an ally deals Hydro damage with an active attack to the following target, he activates action support against that. So now you have action support from this summon, dealing Hydro damage equivalent to 20% of Springfield's max HP and 1 stability damage, and then and restores HP equivalent to 20% max HP for the ally. So Tololo going out there, she's doing multiple attacks. He's counterattacking multiple times. Absolutely great there, and is a good stopping point if anyone wants to heavily invest in Springfield there. Now, if you're one of those people that is willing to go to a V6, the best V6 in the game at this point, in my opinion, I think other people may disagree, but in my opinion, she's the best one. And at her V6, that Tarez is upgraded now to Tarez Assault. When Tarez Assault attacks, all effects are doubled. So all of his effects related to him's doubled, which includes everything mentioned already up here, plus the rest of the stuff in the kit. We're not going over the whole kit, but just know that it doubles the effects. And increases the damage multiplier of Hydro damage by 20%. Increasing stability damage dealt by 1 point. Increases the healing multiplier by 20%. Increases the number of times the effect can be triggered by 2. And then, before attacking, applies vulnerability analysis to the target for 2 turns. And when you look at that, increases Hydro damage received by 5%. Can be stacked up to 3 times. So, just massive, massive amounts of damage at V6. She basically gets converted from a semi-sustain / amplifier to, at V1, making your Tololo a monster. V3 starting to do good damage. Amp even more for Tololo and her together. And then V6, she's just doing monster damage that competes with all the other top damage dealers. And so those are my top 3. There's a lot of other units that have great V6s as well, but I don't think any of them at this point compete with these 3 in terms of what I've seen and looked at into all of them. Now, I have not looked at every single kit of all of the other units, because I know some of the other ones have great V6s. I believe Andrus has a great V6. I believe Belka has as well. Right now, Lightning needs their next big unit, and I believe they're going to be coming up soon. And when that happens, you may see these opinions change. So we're not going to go over any of the other V6s other than these 3, because these are what I consider the top 3 V6 or just dupe priorities in general of the group. But of them, my top one, if you're only willing to go to V6 on one unit, Springfield is the top unit. Absolutely, without a doubt. But if you're only willing to go to V6 on a single unit, my opinion would be to get a V3 Clue-K and a V3 Springfield and not get any V6s, because Springfield is amazing on her own already at V3. V6 is just going above and beyond on the damage, and you really don't need it. Now, we are seeing, of course, I don't think we have the numbers yet for the entire kit, but our newest unit, Nikita, is another Hydro unit, so Springfield's just going up in value even more from her. But you absolutely don't need her V6. It's a big damage amp from her herself. And with Nikita, you're going to be a monster against platoon bosses. But it's completely unnecessary. And if you're going to invest that kind, you might as well start building your second team to be a powerhouse. And that's what you get from Clue-K. But that's pretty much it. I mean, this is all my subjective opinions on these top 3 units are my top 3. Now, I plan to V6 Clue-K and Springfield myself. I am unsure on what I'm going to do with her on Chahua on the fire team. I know I absolutely will not need her, because we're going to have someone in my platoon who's going to get her V6, and I'll just borrow her for my burn team when I do platoon battles or any other bossing that requires her. If I'm doing any other content, that I can't borrow, and I only have one team I need, what I consider the current best and strongest team in the game right now is the Corrosion Hydro mixed team. And that is a Kluke, Parita, Mekti, Tololo, Springfield. You have Springfield and Tololo doing massive damage on their own. And then you have Kluke, Mekti, and Parita doing massive damage. And right now, from everything I've seen, they even can outpace the current Burn team. Maybe not anymore. Maybe not anymore, but they're extremely close to that. And so those are the current ones I plan. So when Kluke comes out next, I will be V6ing her, but that is because I also plan to V6 Springfield as well. If you're only looking at possibly one, my opinion would be to split it V3, V3. And if not, I mean, that's up to you on whether or not you want to do that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, or if there's any other units that you think would be great to V6. I mean, this game, you don't need, I mean, if you V6 anybody, that unit's going to come out great regardless. The game is not hard enough to really be that big of a deal. This is just a meta standpoint. And these are actually characters that I really like. I've told many people I would be V6ing Kluke even if she had the worst V6 of the group, just because she's my favorite unit in the game so far. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you like my content, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. And thanks for watching.